Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you again for joining us on this webinar, which today is titled Employee Ownership, a rewarding exit option for home care business owners. We'll take a little bit of time this morning to introduce ourselves as well as the organizations that are sponsoring this presentation, and then really kick it into, the hard facts of our exit planning framework. So my name is Ivona Machuk. I'm a senior social enterprise consultant here at the ICA Group, working specifically in the home care sector. I've been with the company for about 2 years, providing technical assistance to different home care businesses around the nation, as well as providing business support and industry research for the sector as a whole. Allison, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Ivona. Hi, everyone. My name is Allison Curtis. I'm a business consultant as well with the ICA Group. I work on our cross programs team. So I work with businesses all across the country in different industries who are, traditionally owned companies that are interested in exploring the idea of employee ownership. So I help business owners navigate that process, as well as employees as they navigate the option of taking on ownership of the businesses they work for. So really excited to speak with you today about exit planning.
Great, thank you. Do you want to flip to the next slide? Great, so a little bit about ICA and Keystone Development Center. So ICA Group is a nonprofit consultancy that has 40 years of experience really across sectors, helping support business owners in both exit planning and innovative transitions. We have specific focus in home care, child care, and alternative staffing, as well as just really across sectors. And that really manifests in the form of technical assistance, governance assistance, help with operations and expansion, as well as succession planning. And then our partners in this work are Keystone Development Center. They are a cooperative development center on the ground outside of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And they have worked with about 282 community business owners and support their community partners by providing just a whole menu of services, including feasibility studies, focus groups, leadership education, and legal document assistance. So thank you. And Peggy and Hannah are on the call today. So if you have any questions for them, they are available.
Great. Thank you, Ivona. So I'm going to take on the next few slides. And first off, we want to introduce this idea of exit planning and try to talk a bit about why it's important for home care owners. So for those of you who own home care agencies, some of this information may be new, some of it might be a review, but we hope it's helpful nonetheless. So exit planning, you've created jobs. And you want to ensure that they exist after you leave. You've provided you've provided goods and services to your community, and you want to ensure that those continue after you leave. And you've invested money into your business and would like to ensure that you receive a fair return from the sale. These are the kind of primary tenets of exit planning that we really think about. The idea behind exit planning is that owners have poured their lives into their businesses. It can be really daunting to think about what it means to exit. And developing an exit plan is an essential part to achieving the goals that you've set for yourself and for your business. Exit planning is particularly relevant in this moment for a variety of reasons, but one that we'd like to talk about a lot is what's called oftentimes the silver tsunami, this situation in which, on January 1st, 2011, the United States entered a period of demographic upheaval. So the oldest members of the baby boomer generation started to turn 65, and they started to turn 65 at a rate of at least 10,000 a day. And that trend is going to continue through 2030. And what does that mean? What does that mean for selling one's business, for moving on from one's business? It means that 83% of business owners don't have a written exit strategy. 30% of family business transfers are successful. So very few business transfers to family members happen successfully. And 47% of firms that are owned by people over 55 are looking to sell within 3 years. So this means that there's an oversaturation of businesses on the market for sale by the baby boomer generation, which can cause a lot of confusion and can be really overwhelming for businesses who are trying to sell, but are one amongst many, and who might not have thought about their long-term goals and their plans for kind of navigating their exit from the business and their retirement. So exit planning in itself is based on the premise that at some point, every business owner will leave their business, whether that means they close the doors one day and don't come back, they liquidate, whether that means they sell to another company or to a manager. There are a wide variety of ways to exit one's business. And by creating and executing an exit plan, business owners can transfer ownership while assuring that their goals can be achieved during the transaction. So the intention behind planning for an exit instead of reacting to a kind of required exit, it's pretty vital. So an exit plan includes owners' target departure date, their financial needs, their succession plan, typically a preliminary valuation, and financial projections that help to kind of determine what the future of the business will look like past the point of the departure of the selling owner or the exiting owner. And a successful exit plan will maximize the value of your business at the time of the ownership transfer, and it will minimize the risk for the owner and the business and serve as a tool to maintain owner control throughout the transition process. So an exit plan is intended to be kind of a helping hand as you navigate the process of selling your business and in kind of approaching this new step in your life. So what does the exit planning process consist of? ICA Group produces exit plans and works with businesses who are considering exiting their business in a wide variety of industries. But again, we have this very specialized focus around the home care industry. The exit planning process is really made up of 3 key steps that can be broken down into more detail. The first is identifying your goals for exiting your business. So understanding what those goals are, then exploring the best options for meeting those goals, right? We'll talk a little bit later today, later in this presentation, about what some of those options are, what some of the pros and cons of each of those options are, and finally implementing that plan. So working with a team of advisors and professionals to help you implement the plan to meet the goals that you have determined. So your goals for exiting the business include a variety of topics, right? So the target date is definitely a key part of this conversation. What's the timeline for your involvement in the day-to-day operations of the company? But also, is there a different timeline in terms of transferring the actual ownership of the business? Do you plan on stepping back slowly over time, handing over key management roles to other staff? Do you want your ownership and your involvement in the business to end on the same day? Would you like for the business to gradually, or would you like your ownership of the business to gradually be staged over a staged reduction in ownership and responsibility? Or would you like to completely exit at one time? These are some of the considerations that we recommend thinking through. We also recommend that owners think about their financial needs. What is the target selling price for your company? Do you need to receive that price in cash at close, or can you receive it over time through seller financing? Another topic that we'll dig into a little bit later. We oftentimes recommend that business owners connect with personal financial advisors to understand what their financial needs will be into their retirement, and allow that information to help kind of guide what their target selling price for the business might be. Another key aspect of identifying some goals for exiting your business is to identify that ideal successor. Do you have someone in mind who you might want to transfer your business to? An employee, a key manager, a family member? Do you want to sell it to an outsider through a broker or an internet marketplace? Or is an employee ownership buyout, right? So a broad base of employees, a potential option for you as you think about your successors. And then finally, I think that this last topic kind of gets left out of a lot of conversations around exit planning, unfortunately, and that's the legacy you want to leave. So what do you want to preserve about your center's legacy in your community, or about your business's legacy in your community? Are you looking to take care of or reward your employees? Do you want the reputation of the business that you've built to continue? Do you want the company to stay in the actual, physical community that you built it in? Or are you okay with it being, with the ownership of that company being elsewhere? These are some of the things that if we don't think about early on in the process, might get kind of pushed under the rug and not thought about as a potential kind of like drawback to some of the options that are out there. So in our work, we found that there are kind of a few key moments or barriers to success that are good to be aware of as you kind of start out on the journey of thinking about exit planning. The first is an inability to adjust expectations around price. We oftentimes approach our business with rose-colored glasses, right? Obviously, we must do that because it's something that we've built, and it's something that we have a lot of belief in, and yeah, it makes sense that we'll come at the value of the business optimistically. But without being able to adjust those expectations and be flexible and understand the limitations of the market, sometimes people can come up against that as a barrier and have a hard time moving forward with an exit plan without some flexibility there. Another barrier here is a focus on top line price as opposed to kind of potential payment plans that can happen over time. Entering into deals without preparation and due diligence. So making sure that you have very clear financial documentation around how your business has been performing in previous years and what the expectations are for the business moving forward. Making sure that you have all of the operations of the business, all of the kind of ways that it functions, documented in as much detail as possible before moving into a deal, into a conversation with a potential buyer. We also see business owners taking their eyes off the business performance as they're starting to think about exiting, and it's key to receiving kind of the best price for your business and having the most successful exit from the business to understand and make sure that we're continuing to promote or we're continuing to perform as we have been for previous years. A failure to extract yourself from operations is another potential barrier to success when folks are exiting their businesses. So, we oftentimes talk with owners about management succession and making sure that if you are leaving, you have someone in place who can take on your role. You don't want to be deeply involved in the operations of the business, or that transition will be much harder. And we can kind of talk through what that looks like in a little bit more detail later on. So I'm going to pass it off to Ivona to talk through ownership transfer options in a little bit more detail here. And so off to you, Ivona.
Great. Excuse me. Thank you so much. So obviously in the realm of selling a business, there is, a host of options that a seller can preferably bring into the mix. Allison, we can see your Slack. If you want to go back, thank you so much. So the first one, there's 5 that we tend to really focus in on. The first, obviously, being a third-party sale. This is usually facilitated with the help of a broker, a business broker, or an investment bank. Oh, I'm sorry. I've been having problems with my microphone. Is everyone else having a hard time hearing me? Does it sound muffled? Should I try not using headphones?
Ioana, yeah, it's a tiny bit muffled. Why don't you try without headphones and we'll see if it's better.
Okay, thank you.
Let me know if this is still not better. I know that Allison's was more clear than mine. Sounds better? Okay, please. All right, thank you, Marlon. Okay, so back to what I was saying. The third party sale really is facilitated with the help of a broker. Either identifying another buyer, another business buyer, or an investor that wants to kind of come in and enter the market anew. These kinds of deals are usually quicker and a little bit more straightforward. They're, buy the business up, up on cuff like that way. There can be a management buyout, if you are a business owner that has either a manager or a group of managers that really show promise and are invested in the success of the business, they are possibly a really likely buyer for the business and really can continue it on after you leave. Similarly, there is the internal transfer to family members. This is something we've obviously historically seen, really popular for business transitions. It is hard to necessarily guarantee the sustainability of a business over time with its through family members. So this is something that really needs to be interrogated a little bit more concretely on a personal and business level. Obviously, we are talking today about the sale to a broad base of employees. This comes in the form of a cooperative or an ESOP. And I just want to highlight that I'm sure many people are familiar with an ESOP, but for the purposes of this presentation, we're really focusing in on worker cooperatives, mostly because that's the most accessible option for a lot of business owners. ESOPs often are really expensive to establish and require businesses to be at a certain scale in order to be beneficial. And so while we have helped businesses establish their ESOPs, we feel that talking about worker cooperatives in these kinds of spaces is a little bit more broadly applicable. And then obviously Allison mentioned liquidation. This is our least favorite of all the 4 options or all of the 5 options. And honestly, for a home care business owner, isn't really a viable one aside from exiting the industry. There's not usually a lot of assets in the home care business. So liquidation often, comes at a lower cost. Great. Allison, if you want to transition. So I want to go into those 4 top exit options and really zoom in on what the advantages and disadvantages of each of these options are, because as a business owner, you'll want to start thinking through what are non-starters for you, what are trade-offs that you're willing to consider, and what are compromises that you're willing to make. And those 3 things, while are very easy for me to say, have a very long journey for business owners sometimes. So, as I mentioned, a third-party sale can be faster. In those instances, you can be a little bit more confident that your buyer is going to have the financing or finances and capital needed to buy your business at the price that you want. And if you are looking to use the sale of your business as a retirement option, you can often generate more money from that sale. But there are challenges in this. In a saturated market, as Allison pointed out, buyers can be a lot more selective about the businesses that they consider. So if you, again, have taken your eyes off the performance of your business, there can be hits that you take in the value of your business during that. A new buyer can change the feel and culture of a company, which could, be detrimental to your administrative staff. There is little to no control in terms of a seller during this process. the timeline, the price, the relationship of seller's relationship to the business is often dictated to them. It's not a negotiable kind of process in that sense, and often involves costly broker fees. There is somebody that needs to be in your corner representing your interests, and that is in the form of a broker. So we can go to the next slide. So for a management buyout, as I mentioned, this is really a key group of people that you would like to reward and pass on your business to. It often leads to really maintaining the operations and work culture of your business. Those people are often more likely to know how your business works. They've been there day in and day out, probably have some innovative ideas for change, but overall know the market, know the industry. And they have pre-established relationships with your staff and customers. That's a pretty valuable asset when it comes to home care, in that those are your main assets, right? And customers and staff are pretty loyal. And are they going to be loyal to the business, or are they going to be loyal to you? Those challenges really come mostly in the form of financing. Managers often have a harder time accessing large capital in order to finance that sale. So more often than not, a seller will need to provide some seller financing. And so I think I've mentioned seller financing before, and if I haven't, essentially what that means is that the structure of the sale, the structure of the transaction, requires the seller to potentially accept a lower upfront cash amount for the sale of their business, while the remaining amount of the sale is paid off in time and paid off from the profits of the business over time. So that seller financing is essentially a seller is providing a small loan to the buyers, expecting it to be paid over time with interest. So that, for business owners who are looking for a large cash out at sale, that's sometimes not a great option for them. You want to go to the next slide? And so an internal transfer to family members has many of the same kind of values that come with a management buyout, but really, I think what is different here is the legacy, the family legacy that is created with that business. And it can often be like an emotional and meaningful process to be able to transfer your business to the generations after you. And similarly, they're more likely to be familiar with the business and have their own innovative ideas and know the market and staff really well. But there is some sustainability challenges to that, in terms of making sure you have somebody in your family that's interested in buying it and will take the business and continue its success after your exit. We also just want to recognize that mixing business and family can often be a little tricky. And so sometimes that's maybe a process that becomes more complicated over time than it seems at the beginning. And again, likely requires some level of seller financing, unless the family member has quick and accessible access to financing capital. And lastly, a sale to employees. We really want to stress the seller's control in this process. We work with sellers directly to really outline those goals, identify an ideal timeline, really understand what their connection to the business after the sale will look like. There's a whole host of options in terms of that. It's not just one thing or the other. And so it's really customizable in that sense. And, it's able to be innovative and kind of have the owner's involvement. It really does preserve your business legacy and values, and you're able to reward your employees for years of services. And again, you're able to maintain the relationship with your clients and the families that you serve. This is really key here in terms of making sure a business is successful. If all the employees and clients leave after transition, then that's not really a selling point for the buyer. They want to know that there is stability in that. again, will most likely require some seller financing. However, ICA Group does have access to really innovative and specialized financing options. We here at ICA Group, we have the Fund for Jobs Worth Owning, which is able to provide mezzanine financing, essentially helping de-risk the transaction for more traditional institutions. So we have access to those kinds of funds that help bolster the transaction for outside investors as well. And there is a likelihood that you may not receive as much money in this transaction as you would from some third-party buyers. We can guarantee a fair market rate for your business. We can't guarantee some exorbitant, cash out the same way that brokers can. Yeah, I think that's what I want to say about that. And so, talking about cooperatives, talking about employee ownership, I think it's really necessary at this point to really talk about, like, what does an employee-owned home care agency look like? This isn't some idea we've just cooked up ourselves. There's actually real life examples. So Allison, if you want to go to the next slide. So a home care cooperative on its surface looks very much like any other home care agency. There is an office, there is an admin staff, there is a management team, often directors of specific departments and verticals. Caregivers are in the field day in and day out the same way they are at any other home care agency. Allison, if you want to go. But underneath, there's this structure to a cooperative that allows for democratic decision-making and governance. There is a co-op membership body, that is a body of people who have invested in the business. They have purchased a single share. There's only ever one share available of equity in the business for a cost. And so they are literally invested in the success of the business. And this membership body usually is caregivers, administrators. They then vote on a board of directors to represent their interests in large decision-making. Co-op members do not make day-to-day decisions. They're not being counseled collectively on a regular basis. They really use the board as their main vehicle for voice and are brought in for some key decision-making. There can't be any unilateral decision-making in a cooperative. And then that board of directors oversees management. So again, management runs its operations on the day-to-day, has decision-making power in a very clear and defined ways, but are guided and overseen by the board of directors. So there really is this cycle of accountability and participation in a cooperative and has those built-in structures to facilitate that. You want to go to the next slide? And so just for a little bit of perspective, there are about 300 to 400 worker cooperatives in the United States in obviously a whole different kinds of industries between service and retail, healthcare. We identify home care services under healthcare, skilled trades, technology, and there are over 8,000 employees employed by cooperatives. We're happy to say that almost over a fourth of those, about 2,300 people, are home care cooperative employees. So we make up a pretty good share of these people. You want to go into the next one? Currently, there are 13 home cooperatives nationally in 8 different states, 5 of which are rurally located, and the others are in urban areas, all of which represent either private or public pay or a mix of both. So there is really a wide range of home care cooperatives in terms of the industry and their ability to meet the market's needs. If you want to go to the next slide. And so at ICA Group, one of the things that we do is really benchmark our home care cooperative sector against the larger industry. And we've been doing this for quite some time at this point. And year over year, home care cooperatives really outperform the larger industry. We see an annual turnover rate of 36% compared to the industry's 64%. So really that's quite significant. Our rate of ownership is about 48%. So 48% of home care co-op employees are also member owners. I think it's important here to stress that not everybody who works at a cooperative needs to be a member owner. Really, that is, there is an eligibility status to being a member owner, and then there is a choice to being a member owner, right? The cooperative is a democratic institution, so it has those mechanisms to really allow and facilitate people to participate or not. And then we really try and benchmark the industry among a whole host of kind of categories, such as better wages and benefits, enhanced training, job supports, and really identifying those professional advancement opportunities that cooperatives are able to offer internally for caregivers. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that our tenures, you know, pretty matched as far as the larger industry, but we've found that for home care co-ops that have been around for or have been in business for at least 5 years, their average tenure is about 34 months. So there is a real demonstrated commitment from caregivers and employees at cooperatives to not just come, but to stay. So, right, recruitment and retention is such an industry issue that cooperatives really demonstrate time and time again that they offer better environments for caregivers to flourish. You want to go to the next one? And I don't know how many people know this, but the second largest home care cooperative is located in Philadelphia. So they are a 30-year-old home care business. They started in about 1993 and primarily serve Medicaid clients. They are the third largest women-owned business in the Philadelphia region. They are a certified B Corp, and they have an award-winning training program that was developed in partnership with PHI that uses an adult-centered learning curriculum. And given any time, this last year has obviously been a little difficult, but they employ about 150 to 200 caregivers. And I just want to highlight Tasha Cooper, who's the executive director there, who is just the most passionate and innovative leader and has gotten them through a very hard year and is just continuing to build and envision the future of HCA in really positive ways. Great. You want to go to the next slide?
Great. Thank you, Ivona. So the next section of this presentation is really to talk through what it looks like to explore and potentially convert one's business from a traditional ownership structure to one that is employee owned. We use this term employee ownership to capture a few different models of ownership. The first being a worker cooperative, which is kind of the most prevalent in the home care industry. This is a business that's owned and controlled by its workers. Workers can purchase a membership share to become an owner of the business and are entitled to a portion of the money that the business makes, profits. And a membership share grants decision-making votes in certain aspects of the business. There's a kind of misconception that a worker cooperative is a completely flat structured company where everybody is involved in every decision, and that's really not the case for most worker cooperatives. Most keep their kind of hierarchical management structure, and the day-to-day operations of the business are still run by a management team or a single manager. However, larger kind of strategic decisions and kind of character-based decisions can be made by worker owners through a vote or through the election of a representative board of directors. Another type of employee ownership that folks might be more familiar with is an ESOP, an employee stock ownership plan, which is essentially a type of retirement plan that allows the profits of the business to be funneled to employee accounts that act as kind of a vested retirement. An ESOP is more common for larger companies that have high revenues and large numbers of staff. They're under ERISA, and so they require a certain level of administration, and that is a costly administrative fee. So there's kind of a balancing act here of a business being large enough to reap the tax benefits of an ESOP that can kind of outweigh the administrative costs. And then finally, you know, we oftentimes work with business owners who are interested in some sort of partial employee ownership transition or profit sharing option that allows them to make a slow exit from the business as they transfer ownership over to their employees over time. So just to kind of throw that in as another option that can be some sort of hybrid between these two structures or kind of its own thing. So we're going to be talking mostly about worker cooperatives, as Ivona mentioned, just because they are so prevalent in the home care space. But for larger companies who are interested in learning more about ESOPs, we'd love to talk to you as well. So a little bit more about kind of what ICA does when we're working with business owners. We use a 5-phase process to guide business owners through this kind of process of what we call our conversions process. So the first phase is establishing goals, really digging into that exit planning curriculum that we were talking about earlier in this presentation. So the idea here is that we are getting to know an owner and what their desires are for the future of their company. The second step is to assess sorry, I think I skipped a slide here actually. There we go. Yes, establishing goals. So understanding the business situation, trends, and people involved, identifying needs and goals for the transition, both financial and non-financial, exploring the different exit and succession pathways and comparing them against each other, right? Making sure that this is the right option for employee or for selling owners. You know, we are a nonprofit organization that is here to support the conversion of businesses into employee ownership, but we also recognize that this isn't going to be the best option for everyone. So we really want to help business owners understand the pros and cons of this option and make sure that it's the right one to fit their goals. We talk with owners about evaluating potential successors and what those characteristics might bring, developing a timeline with key milestones for the business transition. Yeah, and then being aware of kind of some of those common beliefs and actions that can prevent success that we talked about earlier in the presentation. So we are able to do this first step with business owners, this kind of exploratory pre-feasibility phase with business owners pro bono as part of our work as a nonprofit. We have further funding to do more deep feasibility work with business owners and businesses that are located in Pennsylvania, New York City, and Massachusetts at this point. So if you are located in one of those areas and want to talk more with us about kind of the grant opportunities that are available, we'd be happy to check in about that. So after we do this initial step of kind of establishing what the goals of the employee, or I'm sorry, of the owners are, we assess the feasibility of transition into employee ownership. So why are you interested in selling the company to your employees? How much do you think the business is worth? How quickly are you looking to sell the business? All of these exit planning questions that we've kind of talked about in previous slides. We also dig in a little bit more to understand how strong your management team is. Will you remain working, or are you looking to exit? Do we need to find a replacement for the role that you've been holding in the company? And what is your staff's interest in employee ownership? Is this something that could be of interest to them, or are they not at all interested in owning a business and reaping the potential rewards of that? So that's another step there. So after we establish those goals and understand feasibility, we do some digging in around the financial feasibility of a transition like this. So we take a look at the profit and loss statements and balance sheets of a company to understand how it has performed historically and understand how it might perform in the future to identify an estimate of value. We are not by any means professional evaluators, but we oftentimes provide estimates of value for companies who are considering a transition into employee ownership. So we take a look at financial statements and provide some kind of review and analysis there and some projections. We also identify the components of the sale and how to handle things like cash and debt. And then we calculate that range of potential sale prices. We also help owners understand different financing options. So Ivona spoke to both seller financing and bank financing as being kind of key parts to selling one's business, both to a group of employees and kind of across the board. These are typical ways to finance the purchase of a business. We work, as Ivona mentioned, with a group of mission-oriented banks or community development financial institutions that kind of focus on providing financing to these types of businesses that are really invested in finding unique ways to support the transition of companies into employee ownership. So these are companies that provide bank financing so that there doesn't have to be a personal guarantor on the other end of a transaction, meaning that employees who might not have the capital to pay for a business, to purchase a business outright, and don't necessarily have the credit to receive that financing on their own, but there's an option there to receive some cash at sale. We also see seller financing in most of the deals that we participate in around conversions to employee ownership. So again, as Ivona mentioned, this is when an owner receives a portion of the sale price over time from the profits of the company. So we'll help owners navigate those different options and figure out what might be most financially feasible for them and for the company. We also help companies kind of understand what the potential transfer issues would be. Things like licensing and any professional regulations will help identify and connect companies with more specific advisors who can help with those things. So that's part of our assessing feasibility, and once we've had conversations with the owner, made sure that this is a choice that they're excited to make and that they're willing to move forward with, we begin this third step, which is planning the transition. So at this point, we begin speaking with employees. We present on the idea of employee ownership, describe what a cooperative home care company could look like, and receive feedback, right? We sit back and listen to what they have to say and what their concerns are, and try to respond to those and help kind of shepherd people through what it looks like to become employee owned. We then work to kind of help put together the transaction, right? We work with lawyers and accountants and other advisors to write up bylaws for the new company, to identify the correct entity for the company, and to put together all of the details for kind of making this transition and the transaction itself happen. And then finally, we are there with companies as they complete their transitions, as they sign their paperwork, they elect their first board of directors, as that check gets written to the exiting owner. And then we provide ongoing support for companies to operate as employee owned once they have actually transitioned over to employee ownership. So I think I'm going to pass it back to Ivona to talk a little bit about the Home Care Cooperative Initiative.
Thanks. Yeah. So just really kind of jumping off of your last point, Allison, about, that continued support. As I mentioned, ICA really works across sectors, and a couple of years ago, in partnership with the Cooperative Development Foundation, really identified home care as one of those key industries that could benefit from the worker owner model or the worker cooperative model, given the workforce, issues, the industry issues and things like that. So there is actually a national initiative. It's called the Home Care Cooperative Initiative, where we link together a network of industry experts to, essentially wrap around the industry and provide a lot of peer learning and technical assistance. We host an annual conference where we present on our benchmarking results, as well as provide a whole host of sessions and workshops that are really targeting the most up-to-date and current industry, trends and challenges that the cooperatives are facing, We provide emergency supports. This last year, we really banded together to help provide PPE from the larger cooperative network, as well as internally doing some group purchasing of N95 masks. The placement within the home care cooperative initiative gives access to grants and specialized assistance. We provide a lot of technical assistance to the cooperatives around marketing solutions, financial solutions, things like that. And then there is just a whole host of tailored resources on both the Cooperative Development Foundation's website as well as ours that speak to not just home care information, but home care cooperative information, and really how those processes and procedures manifest in a cooperative business versus a standard home care agency. And then if you want to, so this is just my contact information as well as Peggy Fogarty. At the Keystone Development Center, we welcome you to reach out. In fact, we look forward to it. Please, if you have any questions after today, please don't hesitate to reach out. Allison or I are both available, and our calendars are, poised to give some more information. If you want to go to the next one, we'll just take some questions, I think.
Great, thank you both so much. So we're going to open up the floor for question and answer. So if you have a question for our presenters or for Peggy or Hannah at Keystone Development Center, please feel free to put that in the chat. Or if you are brave enough, we'd also love to hear your voice and see your face. While we're waiting to see if we get any questions, let's see if I can stop highlighting you, Ivana, so we can see everyone. While we're waiting to see if we have any questions, I have a question that I would love to get us started with. So you talked a little bit about bank financing for these types of transactions. And I'm wondering if you could say a little bit more about that. How does that work? And is it really possible that people don't have to make personal guarantees or have some sort of collateral in that deal?
Allison, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, it was taking me a moment to unmute. Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, we work with a group of banks who are really focused on supporting the cooperative space. So these are CDFIs, Community Development Financial Institutions, oftentimes with a mission of providing financing and different financial products to cooperatives, which is fabulous because that means that they understand the model and they understand that a personal guarantee is a tricky thing to navigate as when a group of owners is so large as they often are in a worker cooperative. So we have strong relationships with several of these banks. Ivana mentioned that we also have connections, or we have our own fund for jobs worth owning, our own loan fund that is primarily in existence to help support these types of transitions. So yeah, we oftentimes connect companies with these financial institutions so that they can receive bank financing for sales to employee owners. The idea being that the profits of the company will help to pay back the interest and principal of the loan over time. There are a wide variety of these banks all over the country who work in different industries, and so we can kind of help folks navigate those as that come up, as that comes up.
Thank you. So my next question is I'm wondering if we could all hear a little bit more about membership shares, what exactly that means, and how that works because we're talking about selling to a broad base of employees, right? Not just to a few managers. So how does membership and membership shares work if employees don't necessarily have a lot of money to invest in a business?
Right. So one of the great things about having access to this, to these financing options, are that employees don't have to come up with the cash upfront to purchase the business on their own. So oftentimes the way that a cooperative works is that an employee who's interested in becoming a member purchases a membership share. That membership share could be, is the price of that share is determined by the cooperative, and it exists in their bylaws. And it ranges. It depends from company to company. Sometimes we see shares, membership shares being very low, anywhere from $0 to we've got a couple companies we've worked with who have them really high, like $35,000. But the kind of average price for a membership share is about $1,000, with the idea that it is something that shows an employee's skin in the game, shows their investment in the company, but also isn't a barrier to them becoming involved in ownership. That money is then held in kind of their own personal little account within the accounting practices of the business. And once they leave the company purchases that share back. So so that means that they then receive that $1,000 once they leave the company, as well as whatever other money exists still in their account from what they've been kind of distributed as profits over the course of their tenure at the company. Yeah, so did that answer your question, Faye?
Yeah, I think it does. I have more questions. I could keep going, but just want to make sure, are there any other questions coming in from the audience? Something you heard that grabbed your attention, you'd like to hear more about, or something that kind of puzzles you or worries you about this model? And you can put that right in the chat or unmute and share. All right. Well, in the meantime, I'm gonna throw another question at you. I'm wondering, how is it possible that democratic decision making wouldn't slow things down to the point that a business couldn't really do what it needs to do? You know, in a home care business, there's a lot of fast-paced decisions that need to be made, and you need to be responsive to your clients and to your employees in terms of HR. So how does that really work in this structure?
Yeah, I think I'd go back to, you know, what I originally said, in that, like, for the most part, a home care cooperative on the day-to-day and even month to month is very, very much like a standard home care agency. There's often board meetings, whether they're monthly or quarterly, where management and the board are in discussion with certain things. But there is no need to kind of tap into the board or the membership body on a regular basis. It really is the bylaws that are developed in our conversion process, right? Once we're helping prepare for the transition, we're also helping the new board develop bylaws and really outline exactly at what stage in the business process and under what criteria of decisions is management allowed to make a scope of decisions, under what criteria is a board, does the board need to be either within the decision or help advise on a decision, and then similarly, what kind of decisions is the membership body responsible for making or advising on. So there really is, you know, a larger structure behind the business, but on the day-to-day, HR is free to run their business as they need to, and are ultimately held accountable by the board. So there can't be any, you know, like I said, unilateral decision making. They still are overseen. But yeah, I think that's a helpful thing. And I just want to build up to something that Allison said about, you know, membership share prices. You know, I think this is particularly compelling in the home care industry, given the low wage, given that the home care industry is primarily employed by low wage earners. So making a membership share really accessible to home care workers is something that really sits at the center of the home care cooperative movement.
Great, thanks. And I guess my last one, though more questions are certainly still welcome, is I'm wondering how the sort of consulting process that you just described, how that's the same or different than working with a broker. Mm. And do you have to use a broker if you're doing a sale to employees?
Allison, please feel free to jump in on anything that I'm saying incorrectly, but you don't have to use a broker to have a sale for employees. We kind of help facilitate that transition, not as a broker that is representing any one person's interest, but really the interest of the whole transaction in the industry. And you don't have to use a broker. And so the difference between us and a broker is is often more expensive than us. We do charge for our conversion process fee, given depending on which state you're in and access to grants and things like that. But it is significantly much less than a broker would charge a business owner for the process of matching them with a buyer and the due diligence and the facilitation of that transaction. And so I think I would just stress that our process really allows for more input from an owner as well. We're looking at a more holistic transition of a business rather than a clean transaction.
Yeah, I think that's a great description, Ivona. I think, you know, a broker is a salesperson. Their intention is to put your business on the market and receive the highest price for the business. And that's great and such a useful tool. And brokers can be such great allies to business owners. However, we found that oftentimes, you know, listing one's business online or seeking third-party buyers can lead to transitions that don't feel fulfilling for business owners as they're kind of considering all the potential ways that they could leave. We are not salespeople. We're consultants, and we provide support to business owners who are trying to understand what their exit plan could and should look like. We might, you know, get to a certain point with a business owner where we think, hey, based on your goals and the way that you have kind of expressed them to us, we think that working with a business broker is a good idea, and you should reach out to one, and they'll help you, you know, sell to a third-party buyer. Or we might get to a point where we say, hey, a co-op seems like a really great option for you to meet your goals, and we'd love to help you kind of get through this process. And there's no need to reach out to a business broker if you can sell to your employees for kind of the price that you're interested in receiving. So I think it's a very different type of service, but can be such a great tool. So that would be my only addition to what Ivona already mentioned.
Thank you.
Well, thank you both. I see we've reached the hour, so I just want to thank everyone so much for joining us. We will be in touch with you after the webinar to share the slides from today. And like Ivona said, we and KDC welcome any communication with you. We would love to get to know you better and just continue to connect. So thank you, everyone, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this beautiful day.